Good morning, everyone. I'm Michael Strom from Oasis Senior Advisors, and this morning I have the pleasure of interviewing Melissa Fisher-Goldman, individual, couples, and family counselor. Melissa, how are you this morning?
I'm good, thank you, Michael.
So I was wondering if you could start off by telling us a little bit about you and your background.
Sure, I'd love to. Well, what would you like to know about me? I guess the most important thing is that I've been a social worker for over 15 years, mainly working in end-of-life care and bereavement and grief resources. And I have a passion for seniors and their families and helping them through that. But as my practice has evolved, I also work with adults and adolescents as well, helping people through life transitions and finding ways to use tools that help them remove negative thinking and have a better life. I'm also a mom to 2 little kids, which is a really important, busy part of my life as well. I like to stay busy, and I certainly am.
Well, thank you, Melissa, for sharing a little bit about your background. So could you talk a little more specifically about why you decided to actually focus on working with seniors in this industry?
Sure, thank you for asking. Well, in a lot of ways, I think I've been a social worker my whole life, always looking out for how to help people. And I was exposed to senior facilities, convalescents, older adults, and death and dying quite a bit as a child. And I was always comfortable around it. And I noticed how many people weren't. And I just feel that they're an underserviced population, especially in terms of death and dying. There's still a stigma about talking about death and dying. So if I felt comfortable, I felt like I needed to help. And one of my passions is making sure that people get the anticipatory grief and the grief support that they need in our community.
Well, thank you, Melissa. Now, you mentioned anticipatory grief. Can you explain more about what that is?
Sure, I can. Anticipatory grief is the grief that begins before a person dies. It may be something that a lot of the families that you are dealing with experience, because as somebody begins aging and losing their independence, or when they get a terminal diagnosis and we know that the end is near, the grieving process begins, not only for the people in their life, but for the person who's dying as well. And the symptoms are very similar to regular grief. And if they're not dealt with, it can make the grief more complicated later. But if we have these experiences and let these feelings come and have someone guide us through them, someone like me, then you can actually make the grieving process after the person dies that much more comfortable.
Well, great, Melissa. So now, if someone wanted to pick a grief counselor or group, what should they know or what should they think about when trying to select the proper one for them?
Oh, that's an important question, Michael. Well, the first thing to know is that you have the right to shop around for a therapist or for a grief group or any kind of services you're looking for, because you have to find the right fit where you feel comfortable to speak up. But in terms of grief, a lot of therapists say that they do grief, but they may not actually be a grief specialist. The first question I would ask when calling a counselor or therapist about grief is what their background in grief is and what models they like to use. Everybody's heard of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, but in the last 20 years, there's been a lot of changes and improvements and growth in how we treat grief and how we look at grief. And a grief specialist would know multiple modalities and be able to find the right fit for you.
Well, great, Melissa. So if we could leave some people with some takeaways about how to deal with life transitions, what would some of those takeaways be?
Okay. Well, in my practice, it's very important to me to have a judgment-free zone. I really feel like the society we live in creates self-judgment and self-doubt. We're constantly shoulding ourselves. I should work harder. I should be there for mom more. I should be a better daughter. I should lose weight, whatever it is. And this really affects our self-esteem and the tools we use to cope with different life transitions, especially dealing with aging parents or another loved one who's going through those kinds of transitions. And so in my practice, I teach people the tools to remove the negative thinking, to believe in themselves, and to move through change, even though change can be uncomfortable, with the confidence that they can get through it and that it's temporary and that grief is okay. And when you accept those emotions and you have the tools to cope with them, you can go through life's transitions with more comfort and ease.
Well, thank you, Melissa, for all that wonderful information. So if clients would like to call you for questions or to schedule an appointment, what's the best phone number to reach you at?
They can reach me at 714-584-8072.
Excellent. And if someone would like to visit your website, what's the website address that we'd find you at?
It's pretty easy. It's just my name, melissafishergoldman.com. And that's Fisher with no C.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Melissa. Bye, everybody.